Hai, Assalamualaikum and selamat sejahtera. We are from Group 21 and we want to present about the termination of the employment contract during the pandemic. My name is Siti Zakia binti Abdul Aziz and my card message number is AP2103XX. My group members is Soh Hyung Yoon and Shahidatun Akmal binti Ishak. Firstly, I will explain about the introduction. As we know, the widespread of the COVID-19 pandemic around the world has changed our life in many aspects, especially in health, social, financial, and economic factors. The outbreak of the COVID-19 epidemic has changed the labor market situation in Malaysia dramatically. The first COVID-19 case was discovered in Malaysia on January 25, 2020 among Chinese visitors who traveled in Johor via Singapore. Moreover, several industries were forced to close because of the Movement Control Order, which went into effect on March 18, 2020, and the Conditional Movement Control Order, which went into effect on May 4, 2020. Therefore, employers are forced to terminate the employment of employees because of a workforce that exceeds the needs of the company. Most workers who lost their jobs were from the manufacturing, accommodation, and food sectors, as well as the wholesale and retail sectors. The Malaysian economy has been severely impacted by this disease due to the restrictions imposed by the movements. Economic activity has contracted and users are no longer making purchases as they once were, resulting in offer for goods and services surpassing demand. As a result, many small and medium-sized enterprises in Malaysia liquidate or go bankrupt because of their loss. According to reports, some businesses are unable to operate their operations and are having problems paying employees' salaries, resulting in layoffs to reduce operating costs. Companies may also halt the employment of new employees at this time, as well as reduce the number of working hours for existing employers to keep their business running. Regardless of the basis for terminating the employer's employment, the employer must have a compiled because that can be supported by the law before reducing the workforce. Next, I will explain about employer guideline under the employment law. First, employer prerogative in the employment of employees. Employer have the right to hire any qualified individual as an employer in exchange for remuneration for offered service or labor. The court industry has also placed the burden of evidence on the shoulders of employers to prove the accuracy of an excess of manpower in their organization due to the existence of management prerogative in the retrenchment of employers. According to the court, the employer has the right to reorganize its company by selecting the number of employees in accordance with business demands. For example, in the case of Tan Sok Hui versus Puncak Niaga Construction Serena Berhad, after considering the facts and evidence documentary, the court found that the employer had success in providing its existing in a excessive labor situation to justify retrenchment. In addition, the function of the claim has been reduced in such a way that it can be considered as excessive. Next, Court for Enterprise Harmony, 1975. To pass the 1975 Court for Industry Harmony, the Malaysian Trades Union Congress, the Malayan Council of Employers Organisation, and the Ministry of Human Resource coordinate. The court's purpose is to build greater industrial harmony by establishing principles and guidelines for employers and employees in relation to industrial relation practice. The 1975 Code is not enforceable by law. However, if any agreement or code relating to employment practice between organizations representing employers and employees is is recognized by the Minister, the Industrial Court has the competence to consider it under Section 30 of Industrial Relations Act 1967. Because employers are so influential in determining the size and recruitment of the labor, strategy implementation of management's part can access ever reduces. As a result, it is an obligation of employers to take adequate precautions to prevent excessive staff number. In the case that layoffs are likely, employers should take the following action as stipulated in Clause 20 of the Code. First, limit the number of people who can be hired, limiting the amount of overtime to a bare minimum. Third, on weekly rest day, work should be reduced. And then reduce the number of weekly shift or work weeks. And lastly, retains and transferring employees to various departments. Next, the company makes the final choice on the number of employees. However, before making any reductions or layoff, the employer must confer with employees or trade union representative. Clause 2020 states that if permanent workforce reductions are required, notwithstanding the implementation of the proposed measure, the employer must follow the necessary steps. First, give as much notice as possible to employers offers voluntary reduction and retirement plans, as well as salary compensation and retirement benefits. Third, personnel who have reached the traditional retirement age. Fourth, prior to retrenchment, cooperating with the Department of Labour and Manpower to aid employers in obtaining work outside the company. Fifth, carry out layoffs in stages over a prolonged period of time. Six, local work should be laid off last, followed by foreign workers, and lastly, local worker reduction should follow the default method. Furthermore, the Code also lays out the criteria for laying off staff, including the requirement for a workplace or business to run smoothly. Second, the work or industry determine an employer's ability, experience, skill, and employment credential. Third, concerns about employment status and lack of service. Fourth, measurement that can be made with the confines of state essential. And lastly, age. So I will pass to the next presenter, who is So Hyun
Thank
Lim.
you, Zakia. Hi, I am Yonglun. I will deliver the part compliant with the Employment Act, as known as AK 1955, and the Voluntary Retrenchment Scheme. Now, I will explain about compliant with the Employment Act, AK 1955. All employers must comply with the provision under the Act in relation to notice the termination service contract of employees, and the notice period shall be in accordance with the terms in the service contract or collective agreement. The notice should not be less than the stipulated period, as A. If the employee has only worked for the company for 2 years, they will be given 4 weeks notice. B. If the employee has been with the company for 2 years, they are entitled to 6 weeks notice. And the C. Employees who have worked for the company for 5 years or more are entitled to 8 weeks of notice. And the employee is entitled to replacement pay if employer fails to provide appropriate notice. And the payment must be paid in full before the end of service contract. Moreover, under Section 60N, employers must first remove the foreign worker before laying off local employees. And the Employment Regulation 1900 FT is subsidiary legislation enacted under Section 60J of the Act. If an employee's contract of employment is terminated for any reason other than retirement, resignation, dismissals, or contract for a period of not less than 12 months, Rule 3 and 4 specify that the employee is entitled to termination benefit. And lastly, Regulation 6 set the rate of benefit payment for termination and temporary retrenchment as follows. A. If the employee has not worked for the company for more than 2 years, he or she will be paid 10 days for each year of service. B. If the employee has worked for the company for 2 years, he or she will be paid 50 days for each year of service. And C. If the employee has worked for the company for 5 years or more, he or she is entitled to 20 days of pay for each year of service. Now, I will explain about the voluntary retrenchment scheme. Employers are encouraged to use voluntary layoffs as a method to avoid suffering losses from COVID-19 pandemic. Voluntary layoff means staffing reduction strategy that involve requesting or allowing employees to voluntarily give up the employment or benefit. Before the scheme can be given, employer must meet with the trade union and have a conversation about the compensation. Compensation must in accordance with the condition of the agreement from employer with employee or the employee individual service contract. And the last, employees should be informed that they are regarded to have resigned if they get compensation under voluntary retrenchment scheme. And as a result, individuals are unable to make a claim for unfair dismissal with the Department of Industry Relations unless the criteria listed above are present. And then I will pass the following part to my teammate, Akmal.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today, I, Syahidatun Asma binti Ishaq, will present about the alternative termination of employment contract. Since the COVID-19 happened in the world, many workers have been laid off because some company could not afford to pay the worker salaries. So there are several alternatives regarding the termination of employment contract. The first alternative is home office. Uh, the concept of office work at home is defined under the Labour Act Article 14 as a written contract of employment between an employee and an employer in which the employer perform his work at home or outside the office by means of technology. Uh, the relevant article require that this home office work arrangement be consent to in writing. Many argue that business should demand employee to work from home due the current COVID-19 outbreak. As a result, the necessity for a home office by an employer cannot be considered a significant change to the person working condition. The second alternative is unpaid leave. The employer work contract will be suspended for the period of the negotiated unpaid leave if he or she accepted. If employer are forced to take unpaid absence without their written arrangement, employer may face layoff. Uh, However, that the employer is under no obligation to accept the request. If employer are forced to take unpaid absence without their written arrangement, employer may lay off. If the employer request for unpaid leave is reasonable, the employer may terminate the employment contract in according with the notice period and present written reason in according with Article 2 of the Labour Act. The third alternative is take annual leave. Employer may consider compelling employees to take their yearly leave in this situation. As a result of COVID-19, firm may contemplate requiring employees to take yearly vacation. For employers who are not yet eligible for annual leave for subsequent year can also be used. The last alternative is travel abroad. Following the Ministry of Health declaration regarding the 40-day isolation rule for nationals who travel overseas, the subject of whether they should pay their wages for the 14-day period should be explored. Employers should demand and encourage their employees who have traveled overseas to receive a medical certificate from a medical facility and not return to work for a period of 14 days. It is important to note that if the employer who travel overseas begin working at the workplace before the required 40-day isolation period, the employer will be held eligible for endangering the health and safety of their employer. If the employer do not receive a health report after traveling overseas, the employer should ensure that the individual does not return to work within the 40-day period of isolation. Employer may demand the applicable employer to work from home or take it annual leave. The conclusion is the aggravated pandemic has grievously destroyed the economic growth of our country. This terrible situation given rise to an increased unemployment rate, including termination employment contract. Moreover, it directly brings about the nation's lower standard of living. The crime rate in our country also might rise as the people will be forced to break the law to obtain more money to live through improper methods such as robbing, breaking, and entiring. Therefore, the employer should not terminate the employment contract without a lawful reason and against the enacted employment law. In this paper, we have researched a lot of law about employment to protect employer rights. In our opinion, to reduce the surplus of the employer during the pandemic, employer may cut the former working hour of worker to reasonable working time and also change the working shift according to the needed condition. We know that the employer should retrench the foreign worker but not the local worker. Frankly speaking, the employer normally hire foreign labor at a lower cost to enhance the business profit if compared to hiring local labor at a higher cost. Besides, employer can entrust employers to work from home in accordance with the actual situation to minimize the operation cost in the company. Even if it is necessary to lay off an employer, the employer should notify the employee in advance or give reasonable compensation to let him get ready for unemployment because it can seriously impact people's life. So thank you